Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. All right. My name's Orlando Watkins. I'm the Chief Program Officer here at the Boston Foundation, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to our second in a series of convenings on post-secondary pathways for students in Boston. Right off the top, I want to thank some of the Boston Foundation team members. First, Antonia Marinova, for your incredible leadership. Others on your team, Alex, I don't know if you're in the room, but Danubia and whoever else Antonia has recruited to this fight. Also our events and ops team, Michelle Hinkle, Celia LeBlanc, Ted McEnroe, Vanessa Tran, Chris Mills. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to pull together what is an enormous amount of events and convenings we do at the Boston Foundation. So really want to shout them out. And I always like to shout out our fearless leader, Lee Pelton, who couldn't be here, who just pushes us every day to center equity in all that we do and to show it powerfully for a community. So Lee, if you watch the video recording, love you and appreciate your incredible leadership. The team at the Boston Foundation is also delighted to co-host this convening with EdVestors, an anchor partner to the foundation in this work. I also want to say what a privilege it has been to partner with the EdVestors team, a real serious group of professionals. We've been partnering with EdVestors since the very, very beginning, right, Marinelle? So it's just been a real privilege and honor to still be in this work with you all these years later. For those of you who are new to the Boston Foundation, and I'm finding out there are many more of those people than I thought, just to let you know, we put equity, as I said earlier, at the center of all things that we do. We are focused on 4 interconnected areas: economic opportunity, community leadership, community wealth, and child well-being. And while this morning's gathering is on post-secondary pathways within our economic opportunity body of work, the work does not happen in isolation. So we see all of these areas of work not as just grant-making areas, if you think about most foundations, but an interconnected series of ecosystems. And we're trying to use all of the tools of the Boston Foundation, our convening power, our policy work, our research work, our ability to convene folks to really move, impact, and create equity for the communities we care so much about. Within our economic opportunity work, we believe that a high quality, accessible, and equitable system of college and career pathways for students in Boston ensures that they have the opportunity to achieve their true potential and launch sustaining careers. Today's conversation will focus on pathways that are based or originate in high school, such as early college and innovation and career pathways. Our particular curiosity is on what it takes to make these models truly high quality, relevant, and equitable. But like you, I believe that whatever it takes can happen only if we work together. And so when you think about the Boston Foundation role in a lot of this work, it is about creating spaces like this. It is about convening partners that have shared vision for impact. So we want to play a small role in helping this ecosystem work better together. And so today we are incredibly fortunate to be joined by leaders from the district, nonprofits, higher education, employers, folks who lead different but equally important and complementary aspects of this work. So truly excited about this convening and what it means for all of our collective work going forward. So now Marinelle Rumenier, President and CEO of EdVestors, will lead us through a panel discussion with some of these incredible partners. Marinelle, you want to come up to the podium and get us started?
Oh, sure.
Thank you. Thank you, folks. Thank you for being here.
I forgot about the podium part. So good morning, everyone. As Orlando said, my name is Marinelle Rumenier. I am the CEO of EdVestors, and I am delighted to see all of you here this morning, the many friends and new friends that are here in person, and I know many folks who are joining us remotely, particularly when you saw the weather forecast and or were on the commuter rail train that I was on this morning and decided to bail out, which I might have done if I wasn't, wasn't moderating. But So transportation is another thing that we need the Boston Foundation to be bringing folks around. So I'm delighted to see so many of you here for the second in a series of conversations about pathways that we are delighted to be co-hosting with the Boston Foundation. As Orlando said, the Boston Foundation was there at the beginning, but is even more there in the work with us these days than I can remember. And I'm just really grateful for your leadership, for Lee Pelton's leadership, and for the deep partnership with Antonia Marinova, who's such a great ally and friend and co-conspirator in this work. This conversation will be sort of a deeper dive. Some of you were with us back in September, where we did sort of an overview of the work of Pathways and the challenges and opportunities ahead. Today, we'll focus on two key elements of that work, which are post-secondary opportunities in high school and work-based learning, and how we can further embed and align and realize the promise of both of those pieces of work. We have more BPS students enrolled in Pathways, including early college and innovation career pathways today. That is really the product of years of cross-sector work that's made that possible. At the same time, we have this investment in public higher ed in this state that we should be incredibly proud of, but those things are not enough. We have to make sure that our work happens on the ground to make those investments pay off for who we care about the most, which is the young people in our schools and on our campuses every day. So how do we make that reality come to be, and how do we do that together, as Orlando said? What opportunities should we pursue? What challenges do we need to tackle? Those are the questions that we'll dig into this morning and beyond in conversation with all of you. We are joined by, once again, an all-star panel, and I would like to invite them to join me on the stage. I will go down the line and introduce them briefly, starting with Ted Lombardi, the Assistant Superintendent, I have that right, for the Office of Secondary Schools. For those of you who are here back in September, Ted is now our pinch hitter, best utility infielder. He can fill in for the superintendent. He can fill in for his colleagues in the secondary school office who have surgery last minute. So we're really delighted that you're here with us today, Ted. We have Amanda Sider, who's Executive Director of One Goal Massachusetts. Loretta Miner, the Assistant Vice President of Enrollment at Roxbury Community College, Annie Dong Turner from American Student Assistance, and Alexis Leon from the Rennie Center for Education Policy and Research. And that's everybody. So now I get to sit down. I didn't even have to cue you. You gave applause, so thank you for that, and thank you all for joining us. And so, Ted, would love to start with you. To help frame up what it is that the district is doing and how these pieces connect together. So one of your goals, I know, is to support the effective implementation of college and career pathways in your office, or your office's goal is to do that in schools. Can you tell us more about the Office of Secondary Schools priorities when it comes to developing high quality, equitable pathways, and how you're approaching that work?
Sure, happy to, and thank you for the warm introduction. I'm always happy to pinch hit, so I'm trying to make it on the stage for every single one of these convenings to substitute in for somebody.
Cool.
So, no, it's a question that I could honestly take an hour to answer because our strategy around pathways is complex, and because the pathways that we offer do vary quite a bit, and we anticipate more and more variance in them. Over the past few years, we have grown our footprint of early college pathways, of career and technical education pathways, and of innovation career pathways massively since the pandemic. And that was really based on student need, and it was based on clear evidence from students that they wanted something different in the high school experience. So the work that we've done to expand that has been great. We're at a new phase now where access to those pathways is of incredible importance to us. Landing the pathways in schools, getting students in those schools to participate in them was the first step. Making these pathways accessible for all of our learners, particularly our multilingual learners, particularly our students on IEPs, is the next phase of this in order to really grow the population that has access to these pathways. And that's where a lot of the partners on the stage really come in huge for us to make those things happen. So in terms of strategy, I always, when I was a high school principal, I'd always give the same speech to my ninth graders, that you walk into high school with all of these doors open to you. And our job in a high school is to close a few of them strategically, but to keep sort of hands and feet and door stops and whatever else we can, and as many doors as possible for you to walk through later on. And what I think we've been able to do effectively so far is, thanks to a lot of folks in this room, is sort of meld the high school experience into career and into higher education, thanks to the imprint of some of our higher ed partners and some of our industry partners in our schools now. So I think we've actually been able to maybe open some new doors instead of just hold more open, which has been a fascinating process for us. So to not do what I said about talking for an hour about this, because I will wrap up, is the complex structure can be boiled down to this idea that the partnerships that exist are opening new doors and holding more doors open for our students, that allows them to feel like college students while they're in high school, to feel like they're connected to an industry and to a potential career while they're in high school, and have supports that exist that just did not exist in what most of us think of as a traditional high school experience. And that's the experience we're trying to build more and more for our kids going forward.
Thanks for that, Ted. That's a really helpful framing. Before I call on Amanda, could you just talk for a minute? Some of us are steeped in this every day and swim in this water, and some might be newer to it. When we talk about post-secondary opportunities in high school, what does that mean? It's a big question.
Yeah,
No.
it's a massive question. I mean, what it means for us is what I said at the end of that piece, is that you get a bit of college experience within high school to transition you, to blur that line. You get a bit of career experience to blur that line as you finish, so that your post-secondary experience starts to bleed into your particularly your 11th and 12th grade years, and that sort of warm handoff that we talk about very often in our schools exists. So that's the piece that we are building, that we still need help with, but that is our working definition, those experiences exist in the high school years, so that when you go on to career or college, that it is not a whole new world for you.
Thank you for that. I know we can define it narrowly, we can define it broadly, as you just did, and I think we have to hold both of those things to be able to make sense of this conversation. And so keeping the broad and then being mindful of a couple of the ways this shows up, right, are experiences taking courses connected to post-secondary institutions while in high school. That can be dual enrollment, and that can be all the way to early college, which is a formalized pathway with a certain number of credits and certain opportunities. And I know that's the place, Amanda, where One Goal has spent the most time. And so can you tell us a bit about how One Goal has partnered with districts on building infrastructure of supports and tools and the know-how for schools to be able to engage in that work with students?
Absolutely, thank you. So One Goal is a national organization, and we work here in Massachusetts as well, that is transforming post-secondary advising and support, transforming how we think about career, college advising during the high school experience and beyond. And I'm glad you mentioned infrastructure, because all of this incredible work that we're talking about today, that Ted just mentioned, is actually the work of high school transformation. Right? Anyone who's been doing this work in schools and in institutes of higher education will tell you this does not happen overnight, right? This requires dramatic changes to staffing. It requires changes to the schedule, to even expectations about what can and should happen during high school and why. It requires shifts in mindsets and communication with students and families about why we're doing this. And so whether it's early college or innovation career pathways, there's so much about this that is fundamentally like re-engineering high school, and I think that's really, really exciting. And to do that requires a lot of support. And so we've been just thrilled, just honored to come alongside with Boston Public Schools to partner in figuring that out, both at the school level and also at the district level. And so that has looked like opportunities like our Advancing Early College Workshop, where we've worked with partners on every phase of early college implementation, but in particular, giving folks an opportunity to step outside the school and to sit down not just as a high school or district team, but also with post-secondary partners, which is critical and not something that there's always time to do in the day-to-day, to look at data, to set goals, and to monitor progress and improvement. So that's been really important. We've also worked with Boston Public Schools extensively on leadership coaching. And so One Goal Leadership Network has been a great opportunity for us to go deep with several schools, as well as leading a community of practice for early college programs across the district, where again, like, we have an opportunity to partner, to convene, to put those bones in place that we need for successful programs. And then in addition, we're partnering with OSS on developing a vision of a graduate for the early college work, just to make sure that we're all aligned around a shared vision for what success looks like. Excuse me. And it's been thrilling, it's been exciting. We've learned a ton. We know folks are learning so much from each other. But pardon me, I just want to really emphasize that, like, to do this work takes a lot of time, energy, and resources. So we must continue to make sure that this work is well supported.
Thanks for that, Amanda. I'll shift to you, Loretta, coming from a post-secondary institution. Ted did a really great job sharing about what the imperative is around serving our multilingual learners, our Black and Latinx students, and the students who have the least access to these kinds of opportunities, and really having that equity mindset. And that is work that needs to happen on the ground. So what does that look like at a higher ed institution like RCC to really engage in those kinds of innovations to help us achieve those goals?
Good morning, everybody. It's great to have a conversation with a bunch of people about the Roxbury Community College Early College Consortium for Multilingual Learners. The Early College Consortium that we have at RCC focuses 100% on multilingual learners. I do want to give a shout out to the IHE partners who have been in the early college realm for a very long time. I sat with them for over a year to learn a lot about the traditional models that were currently underway for early college. Our pathway is an innovative pathway. Number one, it serves an underrepresented demographic with the multilingual population. Secondly, we partner with the Boston Public School District. And so that was something very different than an IHE to a high school partnership, which is what I learned about through my whole year of understanding early college in Massachusetts. Thirdly, our program was very intentional about on-ramping this particular demographic of students. We understood that language acquisition was paramount, but we didn't want to make it a barrier. And so what we did was we worked in concert with BPS to develop a course that allowed for college credit, as well as still enabled the students to earn the required ESL time that they needed from the high school. This took a lot. We had the Office of Multilingual and Multicultural Education on board. We had to employ ESL certified instructors on the high school level, as well as at the community college level, to really get this partnership off the ground. So we spent a year just planning. In the fall of 22, we finally launched our first cohort in the spring of 24. And so we are now running the second cohort right now in fall of 24. Our 10th grade, we go into the high schools. We partner with 3 high schools, which is also a unique feature of our early college consortium. It really is designed for smaller high schools so that they have the opportunity to present this program to a smaller number of students who would be ready to engage in early college. We've employed multiple measures to assess students. We looked at the different levels in the ESL track in the high school, and we really focused on levels 1 and 2 These were students who did not have access to dual enrollment. They did not have access to early college opportunities. And so it was a lot of engagement with their instructors. We were in their world for a considerable amount of time to really understand what RCC needed to do to onboard these students to an early college program that focused on language acquisition, understanding how to navigate through college, and also be a part of a pathway that was leading to college access, career, and all the other things that these families want their children to have access to. And I'll stop there.
Well, I'll ask you to go a little bit further, if that's okay, Loretta, or maybe underscore some of the things you said, because I think we often come at these conversations or this work like, here's this thing, we're going to transform high schools, as Amanda said, here it is, and it's all a pretty package, and we don't spend enough time talking about what it actually takes to do that. So what did that look like from, in a highly regulated kind of enterprise that both K-12 and post-secondary is, and the bureaucracies that exist? Like, what did that innovation look like? What did it take?
Yeah. So first of all, it takes a lot of human resources. Secondly, I would describe our early college model as heavily reliant on partnerships. We partner with the district partners with OMME, we partner with the faculty and the deans within the school, BPS partners with the deans, so we are heavily reliant on partnerships to run this model. We also partner with the students and their families. Our orientations are very different. We have interpreters who are present. Because students have access to language doesn't necessarily mean their parents do. So in order to bring everybody into the fold, we have to employ a lot of different agencies and people to run a program as such. And we are looking for more partners. It just makes sense.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate that deeper understanding of what it takes. We're going to shift gears a little bit to the other avenue of work that I introduced at the beginning, which is around work-based learning. Partnerships will come through here as well, I'm sure. But that is the notion of embedding these kinds of work-based learning experiences into pathways is a key piece. And I would be remiss, Annie is going to talk a bit because she had a previous role as a PIC employer. It's also worth noting, I hope it's okay, that you were also a PIC student in the way back. And our friends from the PIC, Neil Sullivan, Jimmy Wyman, Joe McLaughlin, and others are here. So you really went from being a young person who was exposed to industry to working for John Hancock, making these opportunities available to others, and now working sort of at the national level. And so I think you have a unique perspective on what the critical success factors are for employers to increase work-based learning for students, both locally and now with your national vantage point. What are your observations that you want to bring to the table here in Boston?
Yeah, absolutely. So before I jump in, just to share a little bit more about American Student Assistance, in case you're not familiar with us, we are a national organization focused on changing the way kids are learning about careers and education options. We do this through investing in through grants and other and thought leadership and other avenues with like-minded organizations who are really focused on career readiness, career exploration for middle school and high school students. But as Marinelle alluded to, I was an employer for a fair amount of time before transitioning to ASA earlier this year. And I give a lot of kudos to my former colleagues at John Hancock and the MLK Scholars Program because I think it's a great case study of partnership internally within a large organization like that to really ensure that these types of programs are very successful. There's at Hancock, there is a very strong partnership between not just the community team that is the key point of contact for the PIC partnership, but also the HR team, the talent acquisition team, the DE&I team, business leaders, to ensure that it's not just a community program, it's not just a nice to do. Over time, the MLK Scholars Program in particular has evolved into a real culture building program for John Hancock, where there's about 100 employees who get involved with the program every year, and it's a real leadership opportunity for the managers who work directly with the students to build their inclusive leadership skills. Of course, it is a really strong talent pipeline for John Hancock, as there are students who stay on or stay connected at John Hancock and continue on as college interns, and most recently, the program has started seeing transitions from college interns into full-time hires. So it is an investment that's paying off for companies like Hancock. But in the immediate term, there are some really strong culture building and employee engagement outcomes that Hancock and other companies can point to as as business value for employers to be involved in these initiatives. However, I do want to point out that employers are not experts in working with young people. That's not what they do on a day-to-day basis. They love doing it, but there are some circumstances where the best of intentions may not lead to the best outcomes. So that's where community partnerships with nonprofit organizations who directly work with young people can step in and help fill in the gaps. And from a sort of more macro standpoint, I will say that Boston is winning. We are ecosystem rich. However, I think we can all agree that there are some points where it feels like the coordination could be a little bit better. But there are some really strong leaders like Neil and others in this room who have been driving this work for many, many years. And we have a lot of really strong relationships and institutional knowledge that we can lean on. And I think in Boston in particular, we have a really strong summer jobs ecosystem. Where I think there could be a huge opportunity for us in Boston to think about is how do we ensure employers have ways to plug in to the school system and nonprofit organizations, not just during the summer, but throughout the year, to offer other opportunities beyond just internships. And I'll offer a few case studies that I've noticed so far. So in Massachusetts, we have the Innovation Career Pathways accreditation, where high schoolers can apply for that. High schools can apply for that accreditation and offer pathways to their students, and that I think has helped restructure some learning experiences for high school students in particular, and affirm that there are different ways for students to learn outside of a classroom. In Uxbridge High in particular, there are students who are doing internships during the school day with local employers. I know Uxbridge is a very different community compared to Boston, but I can also share that in Providence there is a very similar model with the Met High School, which is an alternative high school where traditional a school has not been super successful for certain students, but students are also leaving the classroom to go and learn and do internships with local employers. And in both of these high schools, like Uxbridge High and the Met High School, has leaned on community partnerships to help fill in the gaps and foster employer connections. Another case study that I'll share really quickly is in Washington State. The governor has created a task force called Career Connected Washington. And through that task force, they have created a career launch program, which offers endorsements for certain programs with community colleges, with universities, or other types of apprenticeship programs. And that has offered pathways for high schoolers to either achieve credentials or work towards college credits. And Washington State has been pointed to as a leader in ensuring program quality. So not just getting students access to these opportunities, but ensuring that these opportunities are actually high quality and meaningful for both the employer and the student. And they have have a pretty rigorous process for endorsements of certain apprenticeship programs and require apprenticeship programs to offer more information about how they're actually supporting a student, how employers are prepared, et cetera. And I'll just pause right there to let Alexis kind of share more about the policy stuff too.
Great. I always appreciate folks who have both an inside and outside view of what happens in Boston and what's happening elsewhere. That I know when we go to other places in our Pathways work at Edvestors, folks, we are the envy of the nation, but there are lessons to learn from other folks and progress we need to make based on some of the things we already know about ourselves. And I think you're really pointed to some of that partnership work, Annie. I know Alexis also has sort of a broader view in Massachusetts and beyond around what it takes around education from the vantage point of the Rennie Center, and you've done some research in this STEM pathways and work-based learning space recently, and also have an interesting sort of background, a couple stops on your career that help inform what you see on the landscape. So can you share some highlights about what your findings in this research have been about embedding work-based learning and how that fits into your broader lenses on the world?
Sure, yeah, happy to. Good morning, everyone. So I will say what I'm about to say will definitely reinforce what we've heard already, which is a good sign. So yes, Rennie has done some recent research on specifically STEM pathways, but I do think it's applicable across the pathway conversation. If you haven't checked it out, check it out on our website, STEM Internships and Work-Based Learning Landscape Analysis, and also kind of an online guide to helping to build pathways from a practitioner's point of view. So as Marinelle kind of alluded to, this is also a personal kind of area of pride for me. So I was at the state prior to working at the Rennie Center, helping to build the frameworks for a lot of these pathways that are now proliferating all across the state. So things like MyCap and Innovation Career Pathways in early college, that was really near and dear to my heart, 8 or 9 years ago, and it's wonderful to see it actually happening on the ground. So yes, kind of really lucky and grateful to see both from the inside and outside now these pathways growing. So I think before I answer kind of your more specific question, I think it's fair to say the state, DESE, partners, funders have dedicated attention, funding, a concerted effort to growing these pathway programs. As we've heard already, there is excitement and buy-in from students, from teachers, from community members, the business community, and that's a great thing. That is all wonderful, and usually the first hurdle that a state has to get over to growing these pathway programs. So some clear strengths that we've seen in our research, as we've heard previously, partnerships is number one, right? That we cannot grow these pathway programs and any sort of work and work-based learning across the education and workforce sectors without strong relationships and partnerships across both of those fields. The second strength that we've seen is a real emphasis on a deep network of supports. And I know Amanda can maybe speak to this as well, but I think none of this work could happen to help guide students through really complex decision-making and choices that they have to make at a young age without the deep network of support. MyCap and other kind of advising and support networks that are embedded in these pathway programs that include work-based learning are really critical, and that is a real strength of the programs. And then the last kind of big strength that we have seen from these pathway programs is just leading to more equitable opportunities for meaningful career-connected learning. I think when we say work-based learning, this kind of goes to my first challenge that we're seeing. That can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people. That can mean an internship where a student gets coffee for someone, or it could mean a student that's in a bioengineering lab, and could be considered the same thing in the same word for a couple people. So I think the biggest challenge that we're seeing in the research is having to norm on what we mean and how we are defining work-based learning for students. And I think a good place to peek first, especially with regard to high school pathways, DESE has a very clear definition of what work-based learning looks like and could look like through middle and high school years. But it is very clearly delineated across awareness, exploration, and immersion. And those mean very different things, right? So if we are talking awareness, that could mean a job fair or a career speaker coming into the classroom. If we're talking exploration, that could mean a job shadow or doing some research on labor market information. If we're talking immersion, that is, being fully seated in an internship. You have a capstone project that maybe is a part of an innovation career pathway. That is something much more immersive, a part of that student's everyday life. So that third column is what we focused on in our research in our more recent report. And I do think that is really where these pathway programs shine, because they are beginning to lean into that more immersive side of this work-based learning work. And so I think the last quick challenge, and then we can talk about a couple others maybe and how we could grow these. I think with all of these terms that we've heard, whether it's the labels of the programs, work-based learning, types of internships, connecting activities, there's dual enrollment, there's innovation career pathways, there are a lot of names. There are a lot of programs, and these are just the state-funded programs, right? We're not even talking about the ones that employers and businesses do individually on their own. That is confusing, and if we put ourselves in the shoes of a high schooler trying to navigate that, just in our own communities, let alone across the state, that it is overwhelming. And so one area of growth that we are seeing in this research is we need one hub of information where a student and family and community member could go to find information about what is available. What can a student access, either hybrid, virtually, or in person? If it's paid, as we all know, is a huge part of this equity and the conversation on internships, where the internship or work-based learning experience is. So we need a much more concerted effort, I think, around one place where all this information funnels, or a couple places, to just make it a little bit more digestible and accessible for our families and students.
You did such a nice job of sort of taking us through the landscape of that research and that work, Alexis, and sort of segued nicely into my final question for the moment before we engage in conversation with all of you. So if you have questions, please start to formulate them, because we're going to come to you shortly. But before that, I want to just engage the whole panel in a conversation about policy. And I think in that realm, you just pointed in that direction, Alexis, about one potential policy solution in response to a lot of policy wins and changes we've had, the creation of these pathway models, the kinds of investments in higher ed that I talked about at the front end. But particularly in the pathway space and the work-based learning space, we've had some time to implement, but not too much time that keeps us from, being able to adjust. And so perhaps starting with you, and then I will go down the line, and you can pop in. It doesn't have to be in order. In terms of what's working and what needs to be tweaked or changed in order to really meet the promise of these pathways for students from the policy perspective.
Yeah, happy to. And I think you alluded to this, Marin, at the beginning here. I think we've made incredible progress, and it took a ton of work to get these programs up and running. And I think on the front end of building these pathway programs, and I was around these tables when we were trying to figure out how to do this, inevitably we have to think of it from almost like an admin logistical perspective. How can we actually get this up and running? Like was mentioned, what does staffing need to look like? What do budgets need to look like? Very administrative logistical hurdles. I think we're cruising, we're at 10,000 feet. We know these can work. We know that students and community members and business members want to do these pathways. And now I think it's a good time to take a step back and look at these from a student's perspective. I think in what we're hearing and seeing in our research and talking to partners doing this work, it is as these pathway programs begin to build out and get more robust, they can quickly go in different directions, even if they are aligned. And I think this is a perfect time to pause as we're thinking about policy moving forward and start to kind of rethink what high school can look like and how all students can have access and are informed about all of these opportunities. I think whether that is career technical education, innovation career pathways, early college, there are elements to all of those that even as a high school student myself, I'd be interested in at least learning about, right? And so I think as we are kind of envisioning what this next phase of high school should look like, even the terminology, pathways, is almost an inevitable silo of like what is available for students. I think this is just the way forward that high school will look like, and we need to start thinking about how students could have access, regardless of the name of pathway, to all of those different levels of experiences, and whether they decide they hate it and they get to choose something else or they continue down, what does that flexibility look like, and how can they have access to all of those pathways and they aren't kind of hindered by their zip code or what's available or chosen by their high school.
Great.
I'd like to
Yeah,
jump in.
go for it, Loretta.
So for, excuse me, I guess I would say on an implementation level, so for us, we'd like some reimagining or re-envisioning what scaling looks like. We have been involved with a lot of conversations around scaling. So for us, scaling doesn't necessarily mean we need to add another 100 students. It could be we need to open it up to another high school who has maybe another 6 or 7 students who want to attend and participate. Or perhaps we have multilingual learners at various high schools who get to select this program because it has structures that are built in that are going to help them navigate their high school experience as well as their college experience. So I guess reimagining scaling, number one. Number two, it would be around redefining partnerships, right? We need to really do a deeper dive. We know we need partnerships, but let's do a deeper dive into what partnerships do we need when. There's different points when different stakeholders need to be involved to help students with their developmentally, and then moving forward with like career development, academic development. And the last for us would be cost. Our number one cost right now to run the program that we're running is human resource and capacity with the number of people that we need involved to effectively serve this demographic, the multilingual learners, so that they have a culturally affirming experience as well as an academically affirming experiences. So I would say those three things on an implementation level coming from policy.
Great.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
All right, thank you. I'd love to jump in and building on the point Alexis shared. We have to provide clear, streamlined information, and we know that nationally, high school students get about 38 minutes of advising. And I don't mean guidance counseling broadly, I mean like college and career focused advising. Think about what decisions you would make in 38 minutes, particularly with the potential financial impact of a post-secondary pathway or decision. So I would say we need to much more rigorously, much more urgently prioritize advising in the high school experience so that students not only understand which pathway could I take, what are all the benefits of an early college program, what could this particular innovation career pathway do for me. Students and families must understand that. They also need to understand that in the context of their broader post-secondary vision for themselves. What do they want their life to be? How does this fit in? How do you evaluate the decisions you need to make? If you are a high school student, graduating with a certain set of experiences or credits, what to do with that? When to decide, actually, maybe, even though I could just keep this momentum, maybe it's the right thing to pivot, either because of interest or because a different school or opportunity might be a better fit for you. It might be more affordable, or might be at an institution that is more likely, a more likely place for you to succeed. And so we just really have to continue to bake in, not just sort of providing this array of options. That is important. Making sure students and families understand it, also important, but they also need that support to navigate it. And when we've seen that happen, we know it works. In many communities in Massachusetts, there are early college students, for example, who are also in the One Goal program, over 300 so far. And those students have completed the FAFSA at 96%. They're enrolling at about 73%, far above the state average. They're connecting all of this to a broader vision for themselves and where they want to go. So we have to keep beating the drum on that, I think.
And I would also add that going back to your point about reimagining school and learning, I also think that we should perhaps be starting earlier. I know this panel is about high school in particular, but perhaps going as early as middle school to ask students to begin thinking about what they're really good at, what they love doing, and giving them exposure to different career options earlier on. And that could also dovetail into understanding what the options are for high school. Like, are there certain schools where perhaps are more conducive to some of what their goals are, and from there thinking about post-secondary. And the idea, for us, we think is middle schoolers are at the right age range where they're not necessarily closing off options for themselves yet. They're totally open to exploring things. And if they get more resources earlier on to and better understanding themselves, we hope that by high school, students would be able to actually have hands-on opportunities, do the internships, the project-based learning, and things like that.
And to that end, BPS has actually made a policy shift to make secondary schools 7 through 12. I wonder,
Yes.
Ted, if you want to add either to Andy's point or on the broader policy front.
Yeah, I think more on the broader policy front, but to that point, I do think, the MyCap work has done a lot to sort of solve some of the advising, try to solve some of the advising issues, particularly in middle school grades, which I think will bear fruit in the coming years as those students accelerate into high school. From a policy lens, Alexis, you said, it's really important to look at this now from a student or school perspective. I think that is absolutely paramount to what we're doing now. I look at it from a Boston perspective of, we have a lot of small schools. And so what we offer students is typically kind of one pathway, again, sort of by its nature, a little bit sort of hard-edged and siloed. But what we're trying to do is offer pathways that have multiple outcomes, offer pathways that offer, to use sort of a track analogy, that we get students out of the starting blocks and kind of around turn one on both career and college, right? That no matter what that pathway is, and I'll use the example of, EMK, I know we've talked about that in this space before, in the partnership with Mass General Brigham and Bloomberg. The idea is that all students are going to be in CTE pathways, in healthcare-related CTE pathways, but we want to give those students college coursework as part of their curriculum, because we're not just trying to land students in the first job. We're trying to land students in a growth career that could mean, even whether it's an RN that requires a bachelor's degree or advanced degrees in lab science or medical school or what have you. If we're not offering a diversity of experience within these smaller schools, we are by ourselves pigeonholing these kids into one track of career, and that's exactly what we're trying to not do. So that variability and flexibility in pathway designation is something that we really need to think about at policy level, so we can offer students who aren't in these large 3,000 student high schools that exist around the state, offer them the diversity of experience that they deserve regardless of their school size.
Well, now we get to turn it to all of you. Thank you for that, Ted. Thank you, each of you, for. I think there's a lot to dig in there. We might come back to it, or some of our questions might refer to it. So, just encourage folks to raise your hand. Maybe think twice that your question is a question and not a statement. So we want to make sure that is. That's what we're engaging in a conversation together. There are folks from the Boston Foundation in the audience with microphones. Please wait until you get a microphone before asking your question because of our tape recording and virtual audience, and open it up. This is not a shy group, so I will.
Hi, good morning. My name is Dalwin Corsino with the Massachusetts League of Community Health Centers. My question is, you spoke a lot about kind of that transition from high school into college, but what about the students that are entering the workforce? What are some of the resources that you would highlight or say are critical to supporting that transition into the workforce?
Loretta, from a higher ed perspective, perhaps?
From a higher ed perspective, and that's the reason why I talked about partnerships, right? Because, and that's one of the things that we have been thinking about when we need to on-ramp a new partner into this early college consortium that focuses on career development, right? Because that is an additional phase for our students. Once we get through language acquisition, once we get their families on board with understanding what academic enrichment is and why it's so crucial, it is career development and that next phase, which is applicable for every college student. So not just one demographic, but I would, I guess I would answer that by saying, We are looking at a partner to provide those specific resources for our students, I would say, who are coming from 10th to 11th grade to start exploring using MyCap. I mean, we've been in the MyCap space as well. We have to be. But to use what's been developed through MyCap in their schools to build on it, because it's one thing to get academic coursework, even for a native college student. It's another thing to have to compete for a job, right? Because you've received an A or you have a 4.0 GPA when you graduate doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate into that job that you're thinking about. So we want to see a partner doing that who specifically is focused on that for us. Does that answer? Yes.
Good morning. Thank you all very much. My name is Letta, and I am with the Apprentice Learning Program. And my question, I have two questions actually. You can pick one, but the first one is thinking about a little further upstream. I work with middle school students, and so what are the skills that you would like to see them have before they get to the entry point of your programs?
Yeah.
And that's the first one. And then the second part to that is talking about policy. And we know, or at least I feel, I'll speak on I statements, that there will be policy changes over the next years, right? And what are our programs prepared to do, designed to do? We're really lucky to live in Massachusetts, to safeguard all of the work that we see works at that 10,000 U level.
Yeah. Alexis, you want to jump in on the policy? I can go after you.
Yeah, sure. So happy to jump in on the policy. I mean, I think I would just agree with your statement that we need to safeguard all the work that we've done so far. I do think a big piece of this is now that we have some relative frameworks, we know how some of these programs can functionally operate. We have some of the folks in this room here that helped to build that. I think now, again, it's really important to turn to our students and the folks that are running these programs to figure out where those pain points are, what is not working. If we were to scale, where would you feel that challenge or tension? If you're coming at this from a student's perspective, and maybe you do value going to a career first, right? Maybe that is your only option. I was an educator to 18 to 21-year-olds. A lot of my kids wanted to go to college eventually, but they needed to make money right away. And so as I worked with our advisors, which is a huge part of this, we had that conversation with them around what fit their life right then, and it was up to us to help find whatever fit their life and make sure they were informed to make a decision based on all of these choices. So I think the listening, discussion, collaboration piece is huge as we're figuring out on the policy side how to connect the people who are on the ground doing this work or those going through it with the people who are redesigning or designing the frameworks to make this happen at scale. But maybe I'll turn it over for a more school specific focus.
I guess one thing I would say from a policy perspective is the danger of some sort of morphing of this programming is to get into more of a tracking system, right? Which is, for those of us who have been in this work for a long time, know that that's the antithesis of what we've been trying to build here. And I think what we have to show, and some of the things we've just talked about, I believe are the real building blocks of that. The MyCap work into student agency and interest and capitalizing on student skill and interest to get them into pathway programming. We need to continue to show that that interest and skills identified at earlier ages drives further success, not placement based on perceived abilities, right? And I think that's the thing that we can show as a state because of the early work that we've done in this area. And that's what we have to be able to lean on through these times where I think we are going to have to prove that what we do is the right thing, and even if it's a little bit upstream.
I could
Yeah,
build
please.
on that. I'm going to try to get to both of your questions actually at once. We'll see how this goes. But to build there, I think to your question about what middle schoolers might know or understand as they're moving through this phase, I would want them to know that if we asked everybody in this room to raise their hand if they were doing the job they thought they were going to do in middle school or high school, I bet it would be one person at most, just Antonia. But truly, right, like to build on this point, you know, we want students to understand that they have options. If they have interests, they should follow them, but not that like I have to pick the thing that I'm going to do and just do that, because I am not sitting here as a full-time anthropologist, but I thought for a while I might, right? And so, you know, we have to make sure that they're understanding as they move through all of these options, all of these opportunities, that it is about building capability, building strength, building skill, following their interests, not necessarily which job can I have. And also not that it's about getting a job. We often can veer, I would say a danger, again, building on the point, is that we can veer into sort of how will these students entering the workforce fit into this economy, or frankly someone else's economy, right? Rather than, you know, maybe you would own that company, maybe you could be an entrepreneur. You know, how do we keep their possibilities as open as possible? Because I think you'd be surprised sometimes that when we hear high schoolers talk about things as though they're so predetermined, and again, that is exactly not what we want. Yeah. And I think to the policy point, you also mentioned that, you know, we're lucky to live in Massachusetts. I agree with that statement. We have been somewhat here before, and what I mean by that is, as we know recently, the Supreme Court overturned affirmative action in higher education admissions, and the state really rallied, and not just alone, but with a council of over 100 organizations, higher ed institutions, stakeholders. I was fortunate to be a part of this. There's an acronym, ACARE, the Advisory Council for the Advancement of Representation in Education, that just released a report with, you know, pages and pages of recommendations across the board of like what we can do to preserve the representation that we know is so important in our higher education sector, within the law, within best practice, but there's a lot we can and must do. And so, you know, we are fortunate to be in a place where there is alignment at the state level, across agencies and across the administration, to, you know, to stay the course on what you know we believe is important for all students. So.
Yeah, and I'll offer too a couple quick remarks. You know, when I was in middle school, I actually wanted to be an MBTA bus driver, but I'm obviously not an MBTA bus driver. But I think in middle school, like even if someone, if a young person gets exposure to your career and they find out it's not for them, that's totally fine. I think the important thing for us in apprentice learning, you do a really great job in doing this, in building a young person's durable skills. America Succeeds has a really great like durable skills framework, and at ASA when we host high school students, and we work with the managers to sit down with their student, their intern, to set goals for the summer, and we actually point to the durable skills framework for ideas in terms of goal setting for the summer, and identifying what the young person wants to accomplish beyond just the technical skills of the job. And I also want to point out that Mastery Transcript Consortium is doing some really interesting work around learning records, where they are developing some credentialing system that also points to specifically some of the durable skills, and having that be a record that can be portable to like colleges, to employers, and can speak to all the learning that a young person has done outside of just the classroom. So just a couple things that I want to offer.
And I think the connection, just to your comments earlier, Amanda, around advising and that work is really important, Annie, because I think that surfacing of what those skills are and what cultural wealth students have to bring that they may not see in themselves that may be there. I'll just share, we had a staff conversation yesterday at Edvestors about, you know, competencies that folks had, and folks reflected on things they did in college and high school as foundational skills, whether it was being a resident advisor or a stage manager in a play, right? As a 19-year-old, that same thing is true for 13-year-olds and 16-year-olds, and how we help make that visible for folks is one thing. I don't also want to be Pollyanna-ish about the environment, the political environment we're in, but we do know if there's one thing that there's been agreement around education from both parties and from families is that this kind of college and career and certainly career orientation and exploration readiness is something that many folks agree on. And so how we do that the best we can do here in Massachusetts actually matters a lot and could really help move us forward. So our first two questions did a great job modeling what I didn't say, which is tell us your name and where you're from when you ask your question. So thank you for that. Would love to hear from some other folks in the audience. Great. Yes, right back here and then over there.
Good morning. My name is Nicole Price, and I'm at Wentworth Institute of Technology. And I'm not sure if my question is a how, a should, or a can, and maybe it's a combination of all three. But we're seeing the impacts of the pandemic on students' college readiness and even career readiness. And so I'm wondering if the pathways are a place or should be a place, or how can they be a place to have that discussion and to perhaps fill some of those gaps so that when students do enter into college or enter into their careers, some of those things are filled in.
And Nicole, could you maybe for the audience's benefit and for the panelists, like name 1, 2, 3 of those gaps that are showing up for you all?
Some of it's academic. So, we're STEM schools, so the math, even though they may have taken certain math classes, they just didn't get all the information because there wasn't time. Some of it is social. So, when you are working, like we have to work in teams and projects and communication, and, our young people are more digital. And so they communicate really well with a device, but, having to have a conversation with their manager or boss that is, more than, some letters and a full sentence, it isn't intuitive to them. So it's not that they can't do it, it's just not intuitive. So I'd say those are probably the easiest to name
Really
off the top
helpful.
of my head.
Thank you so much.
Hi, do you want to go?
Sure. One of the things that we did was, once again, human resources embedded folks in the classrooms to assist with some of the gaps that you talked about seeing, so that we could do the follow-up necessary. We would have an awareness of who needed additional tutoring. We already used multiple measures for on-ramping our students. So we didn't use the AccuPlacer. We actually went into classrooms and had conversations with the instructors, and our students were picked that way. And so, we embedded supports once again into the classrooms so that we could address students not communicating when they needed to be communicating with faculty. And to be honest with you, there's a bit of a clash, right, between higher ed and high school. We all have an awareness about those cultures where the high school culture is extremely supportive. Not that the college culture is not. It is just a different culture. The syllabus is what faculty seem to, rely on. You should have an awareness of that. There's certainly some navigating that we have to teach our students, but they do need support to do it. So we embedded it within the coursework.
And I'm a huge proponent of work-based learning, and I think my rationale, like especially in when you're working with a student who are undergoing those types of challenges as a result of a pandemic, I think it's a huge opportunity to leverage work-based learning as a way to bring back purpose into the classroom. Far too often, youth don't see the connection between what they're learning in the classroom and how this could help them later on in life. And so if there are some practical ways for youth to see in real life, some of the projects that they're working on for an employer, and seeing how having timelines and deadlines that they're working towards, and seeing how their ideas that they're learning about in the classroom can be applied in real life and something that they're really interested in, or something that adds value to an employer, it gives them another sense of purpose and an onus on them to really think about why they're going on the academic sort of journey. And the U.S. Chamber of Commerce actually has a really interesting program called EPIC, is the acronym, Employer Provided Innovation Challenges. And they are partnering and connecting employers who can offer like mini projects that can be implemented over the course of a few weeks, depending on what the time frame is for a university or for a high school classroom. And they're connecting an employer partner with those classes, and the classes are working together to develop like ideas and opportunities like as through that like project-based learning opportunities. So that's just one very quick example for how like purpose can be applied through work-based learning.
I'll try to be really quick on this one, but I think where we stumble here is innovation is not the adults thinking about new ways of doing things in education. It is being genuinely responsive to the new ways of thinking that students are bringing to the table. And I think post-pandemic, we felt that really acutely. And Nicole, I'm going to hype you up a little bit here, because I think some of the work that has happened is this partnership happening between BPS, the Possible Zone, and Wentworth, where we're installing we're calling a tracked dual enrollment program after school for 5 high schools in BPS, that they're getting the Possible Zone programming, which is deep in entrepreneurship and technology, in addition to Wentworth coursework, while students are in high school. And I could, again, talk for hours about this, and I won't, but the important piece that I want to land, I think, for folks here is that this is the true sort of multi-experience that we're trying to create for students, where what is even a career anymore as we move forward, right? We think about everything in terms of the world that we grew up in, based on whatever age each of us are in the audience, right? And that is not the world that our students are entering into. These are students who lived a couple of years of their elementary, middle school years in a pandemic where they were schooled virtually. And their whole perception of what the future looks like is different than anything that we've ever imagined. So our job at this point is to give them this sort of multi-experience to figure out that next step and not pretend that we know it ahead of time. And I think that's these sort of partnerships that give students real experiential learning that's tied in with a higher education institution, that gives them that advancement that's sort of around turn 1 of college credits, but also durable skills and work-based experience that they wouldn't have otherwise. That is the home base right now until we really have a better clue of what innovation looks like in this next phase of education. I think right now we're all guessing a little bit, hopefully educated guesses, but guessing still until we figure out what this next phase really looks like.
I think another, did you want, go ahead,
Just
Amanda.
to add on, I know that sometimes we think of advising as, just like a one-on-one conversation, between someone who knows and a student. And one thing we have seen also is the power of doing this work together. And so whether students are cohorted or if they have spaces where they can come together and be a little bit vulnerable and ask those questions, like so much about what I think will get our students there is, one, just taking back the curtain and just saying, hey, when you get somewhere, this is what it could be like, but also being in a safe environment where students can actually try some of those things on and practice and learn from one another. So I also do just think that baking that into how we're supporting our students will build skills they can take beyond.
And just to add one more thing, I think that's one of the things that's so special about our consortium model, is that we do have 3 different high schools and students from each one of those high schools learning together, navigating together, seeing differences, right? Different high schools, different countries they're coming from, different languages they are representing in the classroom. And so that really is a real enriching experience to see them working together and learning. I think that's like the biggest partnership for us to really highlight about our consortium, is that we have students from different high schools sitting in a classroom learning.
Great, thank you. I know there was a question over here. There was one in the back there? Yep, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Brittany Luer. I'm with Hyde Square Task Force, and your last answer addressed some of my question. But you mentioned, youth development as being part of what needs to happen in these programs, not just career development.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if you could talk more about how that's been embedded or what partnerships are necessary to ensure that that happens.
Yeah. Should To start, well, I can share a bit about One Goals classroom model in which students are engaging in this content that is about, navigating your post-secondary pathway. It is also leadership development, and this happens as a credit-bearing course that students can take in high school. And it's protected time. They're cohorted with the same educator, junior year, senior year, and then that same community, that same educator is providing support through that first year out of high school. And so the short answer is make it part of high school and make sure that there is time and space for students to not just think about, okay, which schools should I apply to, or what does, what list is the best list for me, but also to ask questions like, okay, so if I go to this institution that's a little further from home than I thought, or where I, may not have very much in common with my peers, like what's that going to be like? Or, even questions around, how do I approach my family for their financial information because they didn't go to college themselves, and this is a scary question to ask my mom for her tax returns. I certainly was there as a first-gen college goer, right? Like we have to really, again, like think about what could be a part of school, and for the One Goal classroom model, that is embedded into the curriculum.
Ted, I'm wondering if you might talk a little bit about some of the new work that the district's doing that really does have this youth development orientation.
Yeah, I think again, it kind of harkens back to the middle school and earlier conversation that we're having as well with students. And, we have really pushed our hub school work in BPS to create neighborhood networks that are supportive of schools and supportive of students within them. I think again, to go back to what I was saying about innovation earlier, I think we have to think about the very multiple means that we need to reach students in 2024 that maybe we didn't think about in earlier generations, right? And some of that is, that advising doesn't necessarily just sit with the school counselor in embedded office hours or in counseling sessions. It sits in other programming that you may have and other relationships that students may have. And so I think for us, part of our shift to go to a more K-6 and 7-12 model of schools and lessen the transitions that students are experiencing is meant to deepen those relationships within schools and within the partners that those schools have, right? And I think what tended to happen previously in sort of the old middle school model was that you have students that are in school for 2 or 3 years, and you have less time to embed those relationships, whereas you're building from 7th grade into a high school graduate, or building from a student onboarding into school as a pre-K student all the way up to 6th grade or beyond. We still have some K-8s in the district. But I think that's the structure of it allows for some of that deeper partner and deeper relationship work that exists in schools for having students in schools for 6 years instead of 4.
And I personally think that you can't divorce youth development from work-based learning. The Aspen Institute has a really interesting framework called, I don't love the acronym, but it's belonging, belonging, meaning, well-being, purpose. Belonging, there's like a big B, belonging, and then the little b, belonging. But with belonging, as we're thinking about structural belonging, it's really about youth agency, youth voice, speaking to your point about innovation and youth informing what programs could look like in the future and what they want and what they need. Meaning-making activities, like the space for processing and understanding like their experiences, getting support for those experiences as they're navigating like new environments that they're not familiar with. Well-being, like it all starts at, are you physically well? Are you mentally well? Are you ready to absorb like these opportunities right now and really take advantage of them as best as you can? And what are some resources that like this ecosystem should provide to enable a young person to be ready for these types of opportunities? And purpose, like going back to purpose, thinking about it's a young person really understanding what they're really good at and what they have to offer to the world, and are there avenues for them to be able to offer that to the world.
Thank you for that. I think we have time for one more question. Aisha?
Good morning. Aisha Kemarts from the Boston Opportunity Agenda. So happy to be with you all today. And I think the last responses you just gave to the idea of how to build youth development, one of the things I think about a lot is that we think about cradle to career work and how families and students and young people are living their lives on these pathways, right? That an actual pathway is their journey through life and their own building. And I think about how parents and families are very much a key part of that work and how students are supported. And I wonder if you all could give some examples of how you think about engaging families and parents to support students in their journeys.
Yeah, for sure.
Loretta?
I can start. I think to Letta's point, when she asked about middle schools, my first thought was families. I'm thinking about who is the most impactful, right? As you start navigating high school, you're more into your friends and more into a little more of independence. But I definitely would be, as from an IHE perspective, would be interested in engaging the families of those students in a middle school. But so some of the things that we've done, families certainly come to orientations. Families are a part of pretty much everything that we do, and that's one of the reasons why I talked about translators, because we've had to have translators present for some of our families. And so whatever we are doing when we are congregating, when we initiate our first cohort of students, there are families there. We are feeding them. We are giving a presentation. We have other students who've participated in the program presenting to them. When we do final celebrations, of course, family members, but also their own educational journey. That's the unique thing about a community college. We are open access, and so some of these students, their parents are at are in our reach and could be attending college at RCC. So opening up the doors to what their own possibilities are in terms of their own pathway. And you know, in life is really what RCC is able to provide. That's, you know, the other 15 community colleges can do the same thing that support early college, but we do have outreach to parents about that.
That's great. Thanks for that, Loretta.
Absolutely.
I know I'm going to ask one more question. It's going to be a bit of a lightning round, but a tough one for a lightning round. If there's one thing you need to sort of sustain or grow the work you're doing or that you think is valuable, what would that be? And we've already talked about resources, so we know it's always additional financial resources, but instead, if there is like a particular bent on that answer is acceptable. Resources on their own, we already covered, or something else that you would want to leave the audience with.
Yeah,
Alexis,
I'll
ready.
start the lightning round.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think we're doing a lot of thinking at the Rennie Center around what we can do with existing resources, especially in this current state where we're living right now. So I think the real important piece that I would just want to highlight is making things less complicated for students, families, community members, and increase this collaboration and connectedness among what we are offering to our high schools, our students, our families, communities. So, and that can be done, I want to be very clear, that should not fall on the shoulders of educators, on parents, on students, on many school staff, really. There is a real role to play here, I think, from folks at the district, state level to provide that support.
Great, thank you.
I would say employer engagement. Employers are not the experts. They do want to, they do want to get involved in this work, but at many times need guidance for how to do this in the best way possible. That adds value to them from a business perspective, and also creates more meaningful opportunities for youth. So employer engagement is my number one.
I'd echo that. I think we've listened to the students who've participated in our program, so we're really looking to try and align some of our CTE programming at the community college and make it a part of the early college program at Roxbury Community College. And that's another partner for us to be working with who's internal. So career readiness, career awareness, and also access to employment, right? And you know, our students are clearly, they want to work and earn money. And so we are listening.
That's great. Amanda?
I would say rigorous, thoughtful affirming, advising, and the time to do it. That's where the price tag comes in. But we can't just give students 8 different maps and say, go for it, right? They need a compass too. And so we need to make sure that they're getting that.
I guess I'd say to continue to be seen as a good bet by our higher ed and our industry partners to be able to solve workforce and higher ed preparation problems that currently exist. And I think that's the space we live in right now, where we're able to leverage that. Having 49,000 students in PPS is a real value proposition, and that comes with investment from these surrounding communities and our students. And if we can continue to have that, we'll continue to flourish.
Thank you all. Can you join me in a round of applause for my esteemed colleagues here? It was great. Thank you. I know you want to learn more about them, so all of their bio information is on the event website, so please check out more about their work and their organizations and their backgrounds. I'm delighted to invite my colleague and co-conspirator Antonia Marinova to the stage to close us out. I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Supposed to manage expectations, raise them. Good morning, everybody. My name is Antonia Marinova, and I am Associate Vice President for Programs here at the Boston Foundation. Thank you all for joining us again this morning. And a special gratitude goes to our panel, Ted, Amanda, Loretta, Annie, and Alexis. Thank you so much. And thank you, Marinelle. You could teach a master class in facilitation. Thank you. And the entire Advestors team for co-convening this with us. I have the privilege, but also the unenviable task of closing us out and trying to pull a few key themes from the rich conversation we just had. And I think it's inevitable that I'll leave more things unsaid than said, but I do want to note a few important themes. In middle school, I wanted to be a teacher. And I've reflected on that over the many decades since with a mix of befuddlement and amusement. Like a teacher, I can't imagine a more ill-suited job for me. I don't have the patience. I'm not nearly hardworking enough. But that's all I could think of when someone asked me that question in middle school. But you know what? I'm just so fortunate that my education gave me the academic rigor, the curiosity, sort of the agency to seek opportunities, and the foundational skills to be able to sort of go after them, even as they change and pivot. And I'm really glad that a lot of these foundational skills are reflected in the vision of a graduate, which we didn't spend too much time talking about them. But I think it's important to start with that visioning for what do we want our students to get out of this. Now, on Pathways, I think it's fair to say in Boston and in the Commonwealth, we've been fortunate to see such a high level of interest, of investment in recent years, and fortunate to have a high level of engagement for many partners. And those of you who were here with us last time, remember that was one of our favorite P words from last time, and I think it's a very prominent theme that needs to continue for this work to be done well. It was also clear to me, though, from this conversation that for students to get the most promise and the most value from these opportunities, there are a number of key things that we have to keep pushing for. Building a multitude of pathways for our students doesn't just happen. It takes an infrastructure of supports for educators. As Amanda noted, some of these pieces amount to real high school transformation with changes in practices we've had for decades, and in many occasions changes in entrenched mindsets. We need the infrastructure to be able to underpin all of that. It also takes partners who work across sectors to design innovations like the Early College Consortium, like Beyond Possible that was also mentioned, that extend these opportunities equitably to students who otherwise would not have access to them, like so many multilingual students or students in small high schools who just can't offer an early college program, for example. And students have to have meaningful engagements with employers. I think that career orientation has to start early, maybe earlier than middle school, so I don't give an answer like I want to be a teacher. and it has to build on each other, right? Career shadowing, job mentoring, internships, co-ops, these experiences are so important to develop students' aspirations and their social capital and their professional networks, but they're also very important to employers. They build their culture, they can form their pipeline of talent, but we do have to be clear with our students about just exactly what types of career experiences each pathway involves and what those would mean, and advise them and their families more effectively. I think there's a lot more here than we were able to just scratch the surface of, so we intend to come back to that conversation. Work-based learning, the role of employers, how do we foster effective employer partnerships in this series, most likely in the spring. I hope you continue to stay engaged with us. I'll close with this. The work of building rigorous, inclusive pathways takes a lot of resources, takes a lot of money. I'm almost glad we ended on that note. So I hope, I don't know if there are any state or local policymakers here, or maybe they're watching live stream, but to my earlier point, that doesn't just happen. The favorable conditions for experimentation in innovation, for being able to sustain and scale programs that are already showing promise, need money for infrastructures of supports, and also for the human capacity that it takes to do this work. We should also ask ourselves if it's time to just, celebrate, but also step back and assess the multitude of options we have now and what is missing, and how to strengthen it further. How do we present our students with our seamless set of options and more effectively advise them and their families? How do we, what does it take to maintain, but also to continuously refresh an intentional focus on this work so that we don't end up inadvertently, bureaucratically siloing options and precluding students from following what's closest to their interest and to their passion? In other words, how do we ensure more doors that are not completely closed and more permeability? That was another one of our favorite P words from last time, and I think it's important to return to it. We're going to continue to talk about a lot of these questions in this continuing series. The next conversation we have is set for December 10th, so I hope you save it on your calendars. Today we talked a lot about what it takes to do high school-based pathways into post-secondary well. At the next one, we'll dig deeper into more sort of non-traditional pathways to career success, competency-based learning, apprenticeships, other models like these that form the ecosystem of options for our students. We're going to co-host that conversation with United Way of Massachusetts Bay, with my colleague Juan, who is sitting right there. And we hope to see many of you same place, same time, right here in this room. In the meantime, I want to just thank you for coming here today and for all that you're doing for our young people. I think the purpose and the value of the promise of that work are more important now than ever. Thank you, and goodbye for now. Thank you.